Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Coach Parker with Coach Parker's Coaching Youth Football Tips and Talk podcast. Today we're continuing our podcast on parent communication issues. We're talking about today parent and player demands and suggestions on the coaching staff. This is a pretty interesting set of issues, and hopefully you will stay tuned as I bring you some of the experiences I've had dealing with these and some ways that you might be able to deal with these in the future for your team. Before we get started, please subscribe to the channel if you get a chance. That really helps me grow the channel to bring more free content to youth football coaches. Thanks again, and let's join the podcast now. This is part 2, Parent and Player Demands. Another topic in the parent communication is when a parent or player demands or makes suggestions on your coaching staff. We've had several of these issues come up, and one of the first one is the parent wants to pull the player because they don't like the fundamentals that maybe your coaching staff is coaching versus what they want for their child to learn. We've had several of these occur. When they do occur, we explain to them, pull information out. I'm such a research geek and written books on youth football coaching and have so many books, and we try to explain to them, this is what we're doing. May not be what you're used to. A lot of this comes down to, a lot of times, is this is not what I did in high school, and you've got to, sometimes that's 25 to 30 years ago for some dads and moms, and so that's always a problem because youth football is not high school football. Maybe at the 12U level and sometimes at 11U and select, but 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-ish, that's really not high school football. So how we may have a certain position, especially our contain and cornerbacks and linebackers, even a free safety, we're playing probably 9 or 10 of the box, really, corners up on the line. Some dads are having a really hard time with that. We had one dad that did not like that we played our corners on the line of scrimmage versus back where they came up and did that. That just adds for a 7 or 8 or 9-year-old, have them play back, then come up to the line of scrimmage when the ball is snapped. That just adds a little bit extra level of sophistication that it's just simpler, especially that no one's going to pass. Just put them on the line of scrimmage and have them help play there. So we've had dads complain about that. We've had dads complain that, we play run too much with our corners. We're playing them more like linebackers than true corners and don't have them do these steps, for receivers and playing inside out or what. At a certain level, especially in the rec league that I've been playing in and a lot of you guys are probably playing in, I only have 2 days of practice, maybe 4 or 5 hours in total practice time with game time, pre-game practice. So we can't go over just everything. So we have to really narrow down what we think is going to win. Our winning percentage, my winning percentage is close to 70%, and I've always been in the playoffs and done well in the playoffs. And so I know that the system that I've got has worked well, and you got to be careful when a dad wants certain things for their child. It may be an unrealistic expectation, and we talk to them, and many times they'll get through the season and then they'll change. What I see is they'll change coaching staffs and basically find out that we were highly organized and did things a certain way and won, and then they got on a worse team or they tried to coach and didn't work out. So you got to be careful. The grass is not really all that greener sometimes, and I've been coaching a long time, and I just didn't come about this information. I tried to do things that were from my high school when I started coaching at 30, and it was just 12 years or 15 years past my high school time, but it was still long enough things to change. And plus, youth football is not high school football, so you got to look at it that way. So parents probably will pull their kid next seasons if we even won a couple of Super Bowls and still had some guys quit because they didn't like how we were coaching some cornerbacks and linebackers and DNs, because we certainly have a very specific way we we coach those guys, and it's not how high school teams play those. So that sometimes rubs the wrong way on some parents because it's not what they did in high school. You got to explain it professionally, show them the information. If they're just still too determined, then they're going to do what they're going to do. Hopefully they'll stick with you for the season, and they'll learn something new, and then they'll figure it out when they go to another team, and it may not work so well. And that's what I usually see happen. A lot of guys go to another team, and it didn't work out. The other thing is had parents threaten to pull a player because they didn't like the coach. We had this happen a couple of seasons ago, 5 or 6 seasons ago. Somebody tried to do it to me. I'm kind of old school, loud sometimes. We had a situation where a coach resigned because this became a big issue for the parent. The parent decided basically not to talk through the situation and wanted this coach gone. If I had that to do over again, we would not have caved in to the parent. He was a great player, still is a good player, but I think it hurt our friendships with the coach. He won't coach with us again. Of course, he had every opportunity to talk to the parent and kind of apologize or just do whatever he could to get through it. But of course, the parent didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to do it because he didn't think he did anything wrong. He really didn't do anything wrong. He was just loud. The parent just really didn't like the guy. And sometimes you get that. And we kind of learned through that situation that if a parent threatens to pull the player because, hey, they just don't like this coach. If you like the coach and you know the coach, and we've been coaching with this guy for years and won several Super Bowls with him, you got to let that player and parent go. We were under the gun where lost a bunch of players. If that player were left, I think there would only been 12 on the team, and he was a great starting lineman. But I think if we had that to do over, we would just tell the parent, you can pull the player, because I think it really hurt us in the long run with that coach, and I still feel pretty bad about it. So I think what you've got to tell them is, hey, this is how it's going to be, and they're going to do what they're going to do. And not everybody likes everybody, but you can certainly act professional and get through it. There was no issues going on there other than they just didn't like how this coach coached and his demeanor. Sometimes that happens, and I've been in that situation. You got to let the player go, I think, in the long run, because I feel like we made a mistake. About 10 years ago, I had a player on my team decide to tell me that he was no longer going to play guard, and he was not going to play for us unless he played tight end. And that was it. That's all he wanted to play was tight end. Didn't care about what he played on defense. So we were surprised about that. And I remember talking to his dad and telling him that I can't have basically a player telling us where he's going to play. That just didn't work. And that he was probably going to play guard again, and because we already had tight ends. I think I could have handled that situation a little bit better. Instead of just saying he's not going to do it, I should have said we'll give him every opportunity to try out. But I knew in my head this was probably not going to occur, but we should have given him every opportunity to try out at tight end. He was a great player, and I feel bad that I think my young ego got in the way, and so I definitely would have handled that better by saying, hey, look, every player has an opportunity. We'll give him the opportunity to try out. I should have not said no to him or the dad, because the parents, it came back to me, the parents were upset that, if he got back on our team, I'd be mad at him for some reason, which wasn't the case, but never know about some of these players. This comes up a lot. We had a guy about 4 or 5 seasons ago. He was a starting quarterback for another team, and we had a veteran quarterback on our team. We drafted this player as a starting corner and a backup cornerback, and he quit after 3 weeks because his parents said that he's got to play quarterback or they're quitting, and they basically quit. They also said they didn't like the way we tackled and did drills, which was totally crazy. And what we finally came out to hear, that he just was upset that he was not going to be a starting quarterback anymore. And even though he was going to be a backup quarterback and a wide receiver and a starting corner, he just was not going to play for us. We wound up getting to the Super Bowl that season. Hey, it happens. So we lost that player. The other things we've had issues with is parents. There's been a couple of parents. I was coaching a select team where I had a parent very upset with me that my son was starting at linebacker and their son was not starting at linebacker. linebacker, and I was just a defensive coordinator for this team. And there seemed to be a lot of parent issues going on, I think because we didn't really have a very hard, steadfast parent meeting, said this is how it's going to go. I was a new coach to an existing team that had been around a while, and so I was new, and I guess they thought I was an easy target, and I was. And so my son was a better linebacker along with another player that was a better linebacker. I know we had made transition in games where it just wasn't making tackles. We tracked it. We did tryouts in practice, and everybody had said, this is the way it is. So there's always going to be issues when a coach's son is on the team and some other son is not starting. This particular parent decided she could yell at me anytime she could, before, after, during, at practice or whatever, and it became difficult for me. I had talked to her so many times about it. She was just adamant that she knew more football than I did. And even though she had never played before, but her dad was a coach and she was going to do it this way. So sometimes you gotta move on. I moved on from that team and was very happy moving to KYA and coaching with another head coach. Sometimes those issues come up. The other thing that we've had is a team mom who I did not know before the season started. And I do not pick team moms that I don't know anymore. Son was, especially if their son is a minimum play player, because team moms overall believe if they're a team mom, that because they're a team mom and a volunteer doing a lot for the team, that their son must be a starter. And so we had a bunch of issues around that until I explained to her that wasn't going to occur. And then, of course, she decided not to be a good team mom anymore. So that becomes an issue there. So you just need to make sure when you're choosing team moms, be careful of that. We did have a parent, this is about 20 years ago now, showed up at my house on a Sunday unannounced, wanted to talk, and really was there for about an hour and a half and just trying to convince me that their son should be a starting running back, that he wasn't getting enough playing time. He was a starting corner on defense and a backup running back and got probably 20% of the reps on offense when we had the top running back in the league and the fastest running back in the league, and they tried to convince me to start their son over this other running back. We did not come to an agreement on that situation, and their son wound up leaving the team. Their son was, probably probably a number 3 back versus number 2, and probably wouldn't have gotten reps on another team. But sometimes parents are just this way, and that's just the way it's going to be. Like the parent that was yelling at me about her son should be starting and not mine, they're just not going to make. Sometimes one thing has to go the either way. They just won't listen to logic. I did have this weird situation come up on a team where a dad was very honest and open with me, and we were just talking a lot about their son. He's not playing well. He should be doing this. And I said, yeah, we probably should put another person in that position. And he's like, he agreed with me. And so I did that. Man, that did not go down well. He was furious that I had pulled his son from the starting position and put another player in there to see what would happen, and he was furious. So we had to go through, hey, we talked about this, you even agreed, I pulled it out, I agree this other player isn't as good, I'm going to put your son back in, but just as an FYI, we had discussed this. So be aware that they may tell you, he's not playing well, but they don't really probably mean it. So I know from that experience, when I do pull players or make adjustments on play time, especially if a player's been playing there a while, I do try to have a pretty lengthy discussion with the player about what's going to happen and why, and then also after practice talk to the parent. I just don't let it happen in a game. So that's one way to get through that. Another thing that's happened to us is parents making suggestions on what we should do on offense and defense, and how do I respond. It really depends on the parent. If I've had some parents that know football. I know that they've coached before. They're they're a coach in some sport. They've played football. At least we've talked, out having lunch or dinner or at parties or whatever, or get-togethers, and they know enough about football. When they're making suggestions and they're not making demands, they're just suggesting. And, I take it in because I don't know everything. So this is one thing you guys can, learn is you don't have to do what they say, and this is the difference. That parent wasn't demanding I did do this. They were suggesting maybe you're a power offense versus a misdirection offense, or maybe run a 5-3 defense versus this, or do this. You can take some of those suggestions and understand what they're saying and use it instead of get upset about it and say they don't know what they're talking about. I had a boss when I worked 25 years ago at a Fortune 100 company tell me that you always want to listen to people because you never know who has the birthday pony. And I'm like, what do you mean the birthday pony? He goes, well, that birthday pony may have $1 million. So you never know where that golden nugget is, and they may actually be suggesting something that you need to look at. And so I think when parents suggest things, I'm more willing to talk through those and respond accordingly. Yeah, that's interesting. Let me think about it. I don't know if I'll do it, but I think you might have something there. And never commit to it, but at least, people just want to be heard. And so if you're like, yeah, I understand, that's an interesting idea. Let me think about it, and we'll see if we implement it or not. Just kind of leave it at that. Don't ever commit. We're going to do that. But I think that's the way to how to respond is, I hear what you're saying. That's a very interesting idea. Maybe we'll think about that if we've got time, or, hey, we're overcommitted now on time. We can't really get to it. Another thing, and this was actually when I was a parent and I moved from Colorado back to Fort Worth, and my oldest son got on a select team, and this was a brand new team with a new coaching staff, and they were getting shredded the first couple of games by some teams here in the DFW area, and it was because they couldn't block, and that's kind of one of my specialties is blocking. And so I talked to the head coach and to the assistant coach a couple of times, sent them some materials from youth coach books, and said, here's some things you should be doing, maybe you can think about. I know I did this in Denver, and they knew that I'd come from Denver and had coached a long time before. After talking to them for about a couple of weeks, I said, hey, come to practice. To practice, showed them some things, and then the offensive coordinator said, hey, I want you to join me on offense and coach the O-line, and that's what I wound up doing. And so, if you're a parent talking to a coach, making suggestions, sending them information that's pertinent, especially when they're getting shredded. And again, it's suggestions. It's not demands. It's here's how I can help if you'd like me to come over and do it. And let me tell you, even today, if we can get a parent that knows football, that is interesting to proactively coach and be part of the team, I'm interested to hear about it. I mean, if they're not a total jerk, it is hard to find good coaches that know their stuff. And so I am always open to coaches that want to get involved, have information, and can help my team win. So that's what I did there, and they weren't jerks about, hey, you don't know what you're talking about. They saw what I was doing. The offensive coordinator, they didn't have an O-line coach, and so he was able to take the backs. I could take the offensive line and deal with it, and it worked out for him. We wound up getting into the playoffs and turning our blocking around, and did pretty well the rest of the season. So that's a big thing. So that's how to deal with some parent-player demands or suggestions on a coaching staff, and I hope you've enjoyed this section of the podcast. Hey, coaches and parents, thanks for joining the part 2 of the Parent Communication Podcast, Parent-Player Demands on the Coaching Staff. Hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for part 3. Should be out in the next couple of weeks, or maybe even tomorrow if I get a chance. Thanks again for joining me. This is Coach Parker with CoachParker.org and Coach Parker's Football Tips and Talk podcast. Remember to play for fun, and winning is funner. If you get a chance, please subscribe. Thanks again. Ciao. This is Coach Parker.